Hello everyone, I'm actually in today's video doing JMA Friday for today's video, having a look at the weather for the next month. This takes us into the second half of February, so it'll be running down towards the end of the winter actually with this. There hasn't been much of a winter in the UK. It's been a very cold winter for some parts of Europe though, always been on the edges of that. We'll see whether there's any signs of getting colder weather for the final month of the winter in a moment. But before I go with that, just say about the ads. It's each one of yours on all the pages. Have a browse through widgets and click through links if there's any articles that you're interested in. Help us page website, and thanks very much for doing that. We'll start off with the JMA then, and then we'll have a look at CFS V2 after that. So we're going to start off with 500 millibar height anomalies. These are broken down into weekly periods. The first week period takes us from today, the 20th of January, through to the 27th of the month. With these charts, red is extrapolating to high pressure and blue is extrapolating to low pressure. So what we see for the coming month is, for the coming week I should say, is that we've got above average height sitting generally to the east of the country with a trough out to the west, and it means that the flow, rather complex, is going a bit like that. Got a bit of a split flow actually with some of the energy down here. That's a cold trough bringing unusually cold conditions to the Mediterranean. We're bringing in the air from off the continent, so it's fairly chilly with this, although with time the Atlantic is breaking down that ridge. So as you get through to the second half of next week, it probably does turn a little bit more unsettled. But for most of the coming week, you can have a lot of high pressure dominating. Now we go through to week 2, which is the 27th of January through to the 3rd of February. And we find quite a difference taking place here. We've got low pressure up to the north and west, below average heights, above average heights to the south of the country. So this looks like a straightforward Atlantic pattern really as we go through to the end of January and start of February. Looks like we're just going to westerly. I think some areas probably still hanging on to a fair amount of dry weather, but the north and west will be much more unsettled. And over time, those unsettled conditions will probably be extending southwards and eastwards. It's also milder as well. And then weeks 3 and 4, which is the 3rd through to 17th of February, this one looks rather odd, really. We've got above average heights centred out to the west of the country, extending through the UK, and also going up towards the north and the northeast, with a trough stuck around Newfoundland and Greenland. It suggests a lot of dry weather, I would have thought, with that. And quite what the temperatures will be doing, I'm not sure. I would assume, remember this is a 2-week anomaly, so it could be transitional. I would assume fair amount of mild weather. Although these areas of above average heights that we've got up here, they are quite extensive, and you'd only have to change its pattern very subtly to start bringing in colder air from the north or from the east. So a little bit uncertain what's happening there, but I think it's certainly a signal for drier conditions as we're going into February, or really a continuation of dry conditions into February, given that we have had so far a very dry winter. Let's have a look at the precipitation and temperature anomalies that go with this, and that was the Northern Hemisphere view from the pole down. This is the tropical and mid-latitude view. The British Isles is just here in the far top right-hand corner of the chart as you look at it. This is week 1, where we've got the drift coming in from off the continent, so you'd expect this to be quite a cold week. It's actually going for a bit of a north-south split, so northern parts of the country coming out milder than average, southern parts looking colder. Over here across Europe, most parts of Europe coming out colder than average as well. I think it'll probably be a little bit colder than that's suggesting during the coming week, to be honest. I suspect those cold temps are going to drift northwards over the weekend and into next week. Overall, I would have thought the temperature anomaly, especially for England and Wales, is likely to be coming out cold and average in the coming week. Will shift a little bit later next week. Precipitation anomalies are drier than average for the south, wetter than average in the north and west. So it implies a north-south split, really. The north mild and wet, the south looking cold and dry. I suspect it'll be a little bit colder and drier than that suggests for the north and the west in the coming week. Week 2, which is the 27th of January to 3rd of February, this one has the ridge down to the south and the low pressure is up to the north, and it looks like we're bringing jet stream through. Now, you'd expect this to be quite a mild week. That's what the model is suggesting. We go to the end of January into the start of February, and those temperature anomalies looking very mild indeed. Most of Europe going very mild as well. The precipitation anomaly looks higher for all of us, so the north is still wet, but it's wetter than it is in week 1, and even in the south we are bringing more bands of rain through. So a mild and wet, unsettled end to January and beginning to February there. And then we go through to weeks 3 and 4, where we've got this ridge out to the southwest and extending into the UK and eastwards as well. The temperature anomaly is actually closer to average with this. So it turns cooler there as we go through from the 3rd through to the 17th of February. Remember, again, this is transitional, so it might be that week 3 is fairly mild and then week 4 is significantly colder, something like that. We can't really say how that shakes out in terms of the 2 weeks, but over the 2 weeks we're coming out close to average, which is a cooler period compared to what we have in that second week, the end of January and into the start of February. The precipitation is also coming out drier for the south, so cooler and drier is signal for England and Wales, still quite unsettled up to the north. That's for JMA. Let's have a look at CFS V2 and see how that sees things progressing for the next month. So again, these are 500 millibar heights broken down into weekly periods. The first week period taking us from the 20th through to the 26th of January. Very similar to what the JMA is doing for this week. We've got the ridge out to the north and the east of us, but trough is out to the down to the south and out to the west as well. It leaves us with quite a continental flow, the air coming in from off the continent where it is frozen. Been really cold over the past few days across most parts of Central and Southern Europe, and that's where the air is coming from. So you'd expect it to be pretty cold through the week ahead. And then we go through to week 2. This looks different to what the JMA is doing with this. It's not quite as clear-cut in terms of westerlies. The ridge is going up towards Scandinavia. We've got low pressure out in the Atlantic, so we are trying to bring in an Atlantic flow. We're probably doing something a bit like that, but we could be sending some of the energy southeastwards as well. That looks like a bit of a battleground scenario, really. The Atlantic is more influential there from the 27th of January to the 2nd of February, week 2. But that ridge is still quite close to us. It is centred over Scandinavia, so it would be threatening certainly eastern parts of the country to keep some colder air very close by. Then we go through to week 3, which is the 3rd through to the 9th of February. And again, it is different to what the JMA is doing here. We've got the jet stream probably going on a northwest-southeast trajectory. The ridge is extending through into eastern parts of Europe over here, heading off towards the Black Sea. So again, the jet stream is probably doing something like that. We're almost on the cold side of the jet there. We need to take that trough that's in the Atlantic and send it through like that, which would open the door sort of northerly winds. We're not quite doing that, but it's more unsettled and probably, I would have thought, not overly mild. The model will probably suggest very mild, because it always does, being the CFS. But that doesn't look to me as though it's a tremendously mild scenario. And then we move through to week 4, which again is different to the JMA. We've got the trough out to west of us. The ridge is still there across eastern parts of the country. Notice all of this red appearing up here. That's a bit of northern blocking over the top of the pole, but not really able to influence us. Again, the jet stream is probably doing something a bit like that. It does look more unsettled there than what the JMA is doing for week 4, which is the 10th through the 16th of February. Temperatures, they don't look it doesn't look like an overly mild signal to me. I suspect that the temperatures will be signalled by the model to be significantly warmer than average, but I wouldn't have thought that's overly mild. Just looks quite unsettled, especially to the north and west. It's a very complicated scenario to decipher from both of these models this morning as we're going into February. There's a lot of question marks really, that are hanging over this, I think, as we're going into February. I'm not sure these models are getting the patterns quite right, especially these weeks 3 and week 4 anomalies. Temperature anomalies for the next week coming out very significantly colder than average for southern parts of the UK and most parts of Europe as well. That looks more in line with what I suspect to see with those temperature anomalies for the coming week. I think the JMA was overdoing those temperatures there through week 1. That looks closer to how things are likely to pan out in the next week. Then we go through to week 2 and we find those cold temperature anomalies being pushed into the east of Europe as many western areas are turning warmer than average, so milder than average into January instead of February. Both models in agreement about that. And then we go through to week 3 and the model is still going very significantly milder than average as it is in week 4 as well. Notice most parts of Europe very significantly milder than average also in week 4, the 10th to the 17th of February. I'm not sure about that at all. I think that the model is doesn't really have this worked out for February, and that could be down to what's happening in the stratosphere over the North Pole at the moment, or will be happening next week when we get that stratospheric warming. But in any case, I don't think this pattern, the suggested 500 millibar high anomaly, suggests that it'll be as warm as this as we're going into February. So we need to wait and see on that. Precipitation for the coming week, it's very substantially drier than average. Week 2 is also turning out drier than average. Week 3 is turning much more unsettled. So the Atlantic definitely time to get back in as you get through to the start of February. Notice much of the rain is suggested to be to the south and southwest, interestingly. So again, I think that sort of ties in with the idea that the jet stream is on a little bit of a southerly track there. So I'm not sure why it should be as mild as the model is showing, as warm as the model is showing, if the jet stream's generally going to the south of the country. But anyway, precipitation for week 3 goes above average, and then it looks generally suggested to be a little bit wetter than average in week 4 as well. But as I say, I'm not sure the models have really got this end of the start of February, early February period worked out. So I think confidence in this one this week is a little bit lower than normal. Certainly going through to January, I think got the pattern worked out, which is cold and frosty, and then at the end of January we're going to go mild and unsettled. That carries us through to the opening of February, but I'm not sure it's going to last all that long into February. And I suspect that we'll get into the first and second weeks of February, particularly week 2 in February, and we'll find quite a significant change beginning to take place. So up to the end of January, they look fairly straightforward. What's going to happen into February, I think there's a lot of question marks about what happens then. Right, later on we'll have a look at weather next week to 10 days. Come back to that this afternoon. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.